Imagine this. He's used to being the one who holds the power, the one who commands attention, the one who moves through life with a quiet certainty that everyone around him falls in line. He's convinced that he knows himself, that he's untouchable, that nothing can crack his fortress of control. And then, she walks into his life. At first, she seems like just another figure, another person who passes through his world. But something changes, something shifts in the air the moment she enters. It's subtle, almost imperceptible. She doesn't try to impress him, doesn't try to draw him in with charm or games. No, she simply exists in her fullness, in her self-awareness, in her quiet power. And that's when the mirror is held up to him. Not in the way he expected, not in the way he had conditioned himself to see relationships, as transactions, as means to an end. No, this mirror reflects something he never anticipated. His own fragility, his own hidden fears. She doesn't speak a word, but the longer he watches her, the more he realizes that she is not just another reflection of his own desires, his own ego. She is something deeper, something raw, something real. In Jungian terms, she becomes the anima, the feminine archetype that exists in every man's unconscious, the mirror of his soul that reflects back the parts of him he has neglected, the aspects of himself he has never truly acknowledged. In her presence, he begins to see the cracks in his carefully constructed identity. The walls he built to protect himself from vulnerability start to crumble. And it terrifies him, because for the first time, he is faced with himself in a way he cannot deny. She doesn't chase him, she doesn't need him. She simply is. And that is the most powerful force he's ever encountered. Her presence becomes an enigma, a riddle he cannot solve. And every moment he spends with her, he is forced to confront the darkest corners of his own psyche. She has no intention of fixing him, of saving him. She simply reflects back to him the truth of who he is, unfiltered, unpolished. She holds up the mirror, and all his shadows, all his insecurities, all the things he has run from come rushing forward. For the first time, he is confronted with the depth of his own emotional wounds. She becomes the mirror he can't look away from, and in that reflection, he sees everything he's been hiding from. As the days go by, the weight of this mirror grows heavier. He can no longer escape it. The reflection she offers is not one of idealized masculinity or the heroic image he once crafted for himself. No, her silence speaks volumes, and the truth is unmistakable. It exposes his hidden fragility, his unsaid doubts, and the truth that for all his outward confidence, he has been living a lie. What he sees in her gaze is not the adoration he thought he was entitled to, but something far more unsettling, a recognition of his own humanity. She doesn't see him as a conqueror, a leader, or the object of desire he's used to being. She sees him simply as he is. And in that simplicity, in her ability to see him without judgment, he begins to unravel. He can no longer hide behind the facade he has so carefully constructed. The anima, in Jungian terms, is not just the idealized feminine image that exists within a man's unconscious. She is also the force of transformation. She does not exist to make him comfortable, but to challenge him, to awaken him to the aspects of himself that have been buried. This mirror she holds up is a tool of individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating all the aspects of the self that have been suppressed or ignored. In confronting her, he is forced to confront himself. Her silence, so often perceived as cold or indifferent, becomes the fire in which he is forged. It burns away the illusions of who he thought he was. It strips him of his ego-driven desires, his need for validation, and his dependence on external approval. With every glance, with every moment spent in her presence, he is stripped bare, exposed to the raw vulnerability of his own soul. The mirror does not lie. It shows him exactly who he is, broken, imperfect, and desperate for authenticity. At first, he resists. He wants to control the reflection, wants to change the image she reflects back to him. He wants to mold it into something he can manage, something that doesn't reveal the chaos inside. But she refuses to conform. She is not interested in his games. She simply exists, untethered, untouched by his need for validation. In her stillness, she teaches him that true power lies not in control, but in surrender. Surrender to oneself, surrender to the process of growth, and surrender to the truth, no matter how painful. And this is where the transformation begins. Slowly, painfully, he starts to let go. He starts to shed the layers of falsehoods he's wrapped himself in for so long. He begins to see himself as she sees him. Imperfect, vulnerable, and most importantly, human. And for the first time in his life, he begins to accept himself fully. Not because of what he has achieved, not because of the validation he receives from others, but because he realizes that he is enough as he is. She became the mirror he couldn't look away from, not because she forced him to, but because, in her reflection, he found himself for the first time. And in that self-recognition, he discovers a power that transcends the ego, a power rooted in authenticity, self-acceptance, and the courage to face the darkest corners of his own soul. With each passing day, the reflection in the mirror deepens. What began as a painful confrontation with the parts of himself he never wished to see becomes, slowly, a journey toward liberation. The man who once craved validation from external sources, the man who feared being seen as imperfect, begins to understand the true nature of strength. The strength he once thought was measured by dominance and control was nothing more than a fragile facade. True strength lies in vulnerability, in the courage to be seen in one's entirety, flaws and all. And it is through this understanding that he begins to release his need for validation. The woman, without even lifting a finger, has liberated him from the chains of ego, from the endless cycle of seeking external approval. In the quiet of her presence, he comes to see that she does not need to be fixed, does not need to be won over or conquered. She stands in her power, perfectly content with herself, not demanding anything from him, but offering him the mirror to look deeper into his own soul. And this is where the man starts to shift. The very thing he feared most, being stripped of his defenses, becomes the gateway to true freedom. The ego battles, the prideful self-defense mechanisms begin to dissolve. He understands that the woman is not the source of his suffering, but the catalyst for his growth. She reflects back to him not only his weaknesses, but also his untapped potential. She has shown him, through her silence and stillness, that the most important relationship he will ever have is with himself. As he looks deeper into the mirror she holds up, he no longer sees a broken man. He sees someone who has the power to transform, to heal, to become whole. It is not about fixing himself to fit some idealized image, but about embracing the fullness of who he is, without shame, without fear. The woman who once seemed so distant and enigmatic is now the guiding force that leads him back to his truest self. And in this return to self, something profound happens. His desire for her shifts. It is no longer about needing her to complete him, to validate him, to fix him. It becomes about the recognition of the equal partnership they can offer each other. She is no longer the mirror he cannot look away from. She is the mirror that has shown him the man he always had the potential to be. And in this reflection, he realizes that he can choose to be whole, to be powerful, and to walk the path of his own individuation. The mirror has done its work. The woman's quiet presence, her strength, her refusal to be anything other than herself, has awakened him to his own. He is no longer the man who was lost in his ego, seeking to conquer and control. He is a man who has learned the art of self-acceptance, of letting go, and of stepping into his authentic power. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses. And through her choice, she has guided him to choose himself.